Hi guys, let's have a look at some Infocom game source code now that we have availability to it, which is fantastic news. So I've got mine in my Zilf folder, and ones I've been poking around in are Spellbreaker, Lurking Horror, and a quick look at Restaurant as well. So the ones that are particularly of interest to me are Spellbreaker, and I'll tell you why. If I just open it up, it's a version 3 file, there it is. Do the inventory, we see we've got the magic burin, and that is important because that is the item that's going to do some writing. And writing in Sil is something that I took a stab at last year. Made a fractional amount of progress with it, and then basically just had to shelve it because it was just proving a bit too much for a man of my admittedly limited coding ability. But at that point, it was just parked, and there was other stuff going off as well, work stuff and whatnot. So my attention was elsewhere really. But anyway, I digress. So let's have a look at Spellbreaker. So I've opened up some of the code files. The interesting part for me is you'll see that these are all the files along the top. I can't count them, but at a quick count, we've got maybe 15 files there, and then over here is one that I've created called writing.zil. Now this is purely, I've gone through all the files individually and pulled out so far, and I'm sure this isn't exhaustive, I'm sure there's more, but I've basically pulled out all the sections which utilise a write command or a write function. And so as you can see down here, obviously you've got the burin where you can use it to write onto objects. Specifically, you use it to write onto cubes, and here's the routine down here to write. So what I tend to do is, my general plan is I'm going to pull all this code out, try to work my way through it, and then I'm probably going to add it, if at all possible, to a file that I've been very gently updating over time called Verbs Plus. And it may be that ultimately gets decided to pull it into the main release of the Zilf software, possibly. Or if not, I'll just keep it in Verbs Plus, and I'll just make this Verbs Plus available. Verbs Plus one that I started working on over a year ago now, and it's just commands that I just feel are more naturally usable once you're in the game. And I was finding that they weren't really in the game as a standard, so I just started pulling them out of other games that I found them in, and putting them into Verbs Plus, and now I include that as one of my standard files, and then I have all those functions. So yes, so writing. So eventually, hopefully, the plan is to obviously replace cube by things like paper and burin by pen, and eventually we'll be able to write something on something, write ABC on paper and things like that. So, but Spellbreaker generally is a really interesting one. Now, I mean, typically what you would have, or really what you're taught if you use the Zil manual and the way we've been doing it for so long, is in not bin. Which one is it now? Come on. Okay, here we go. So basically, you have your general breakdown of Zil files: events, orphan, parser, pronouns, pseudo, scope, verbs, and that's usually the structure of it. And then you create one typically called main.zil, or whatever the game file might be. So, for example, there's one called Cloak Plus, and this is the ever popular Advent. And again, this is the main file for Adventure. And you'll see that they tend to all follow this format. So you've got general directives, you've got your opening, setting up the version that you're going to use, then you've got your go routine down here, all this sort of code along this side, and it defines where you're going to start. And that's a typical way of structuring it. Now, interestingly, I'm just going to close that down so I don't lose my way a little bit. But yes, so Spellbreaker breaks it. Dave Lebling has completely restructured it, and so, for example, I think in misc.zil, mercifully, he's actually titled it. He's put a bit of commentary in here. So former main.zil stuff, and it's here it is. Look, well, in fact, I put that in actually because I wanted to use a different version than what it was originally compiling to. And then obviously you see you've got your go routine down here. So this is stuff that typically would be in your main game file or your main.zil. But Dave has completely he's gone his own way and he's broken it all out into all these different sections. One of the main files is Z6. You'll note that although I'm in the UK, I'm in the habit of saying Z just basically because when I'm dealing with the Infocom stuff, I'm using the American terminology. So I tend to say Z machine, Z code, but equally I'll say ZX Spectrum. So it depends on what I'm working with. So for this, Z6 or Z6, whatever you flavour there. This has got much of the stuff again that you would have in a main file. So typically you would, and you can see this line here. I've actually had a go at inserting my verbs plus file. That didn't quite work too well, but inserting files. Now this typically is something that you would have in your main game file, but again Dave has stripped that out and he's put it into this Z6 file. Apart from that, we've got all the usual stuff. He's also got one called C2, C3, C4. There's an awful lot of stuff in these, which again, rooms, stuff that really, I don't know if that's sort of, oh, maybe that's chapter. Maybe chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, possibly. Let's have a look, see if there's any sort of clue to what that is. I didn't think of that before, maybe that's what it is. I mean, certainly he's divided them up, so I must admit I've never played Spellbreaker that deeply, so but perhaps it is in 4 sort of sections, and it does seem to be that you've got, water cubes in one section and earth cubes in the other section, and so on and so forth. So it seems to be how it's divided up. But yeah, this is he's really chopped this up. So this is some great fun trying to work through these. He's even done some work in the parser file, so he really has kind of gone to town and coded up his own version, which no doubt most of the other guys did as well. And we'll be finding out all in due time. So this is just literally a high-level overview of the Spellbreaker files. Hope it's been vaguely interesting, and we'll see if we can do some more videos like this for you soon. Okay, cheers guys, thanks.